chosen one, today you are not here by accident. You were called through storms, shaped by mistakes and refined by trials. God does not waste pain, He transforms it into purpose. Every wrong turn taught you direction. Every fall trained you to rise. What you once called failure was preparation. What you called shame was a lesson in humility and strength. You are evidence that mercy rewrites stories and destiny outlives sin. Stand tall, not because you were perfect, but because you were forgiven, guided, and chosen to carry light where darkness once lived. This is your awakening moment. Sin was never meant to be your final address. It was a classroom you passed through. A classroom is not where you live, it is where you learn. You entered it without knowing the lesson plan, and sometimes you stayed longer than you should have. But even there, God was teaching you something about yourself, about consequences, about hunger for change, about the cost of compromise, and about the value of truth. You thought the mistake was the story, but the lesson was always the point. Every wrong decision carried information. It showed you what happens when desire leads instead of wisdom. It showed you how fragile pride really is. It showed you how quickly comfort can become a chain. But chains can be broken, and classrooms can be exited. You were not put in that season to be labeled. You were put there to be educated. The fall was not the verdict. It was the wake-up call. Look at how awareness was born out of error. Before the failure, you were confident. After the failure, you became conscious. Conscious of who you trusted. Conscious of what you tolerated. Conscious of what you ignored inside yourself. Sin did not make you wise, but the consequences forced you to look for wisdom. That is the difference between destruction and instruction. Destruction leaves nothing standing. Instruction leaves understanding. You learned how fast things fall apart when character is missing. You learned how loud the silence becomes when peace walks out. You learned that shortcuts always charge interest later. These were not random lessons. They were precise, painful, and purposeful. There are things you only learn when you lose. When you lost respect, you learned the value of integrity. When you lost time, you learned the importance of discipline. When you lost people, you learned discernment. When you lost your own approval of yourself, you learned the power of repentance. These were not cruel lessons, they were necessary ones. Some people never learn because they never reflect. But you did. You felt the weight of what you did, and instead of running from it, something in you started to rise up and ask for better. That is not weakness, that is the beginning of transformation. Sin tried to define you, but it only revealed you. It showed you what still needed healing. It exposed what still needed discipline. It uncovered what still needed surrender. Exposure is not humiliation. When God is involved, it is preparation. He cannot heal what you hide, and He cannot correct what you deny. So the failure pulled the mask off. It took away the illusion that you were fine. It stripped away false confidence and forced you to see your real condition. That is why growth often feels like breaking first. Because what was false has to collapse before what is true can rise. You were not trapped in that behavior because you loved it. You were trapped because you did not yet know another way. The classroom teaches the difference between impulse and intention. It teaches you that not every feeling deserves obedience. It teaches you that not every opportunity deserves acceptance. It teaches you that freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is having the strength to choose what is right, even when wrong feels easier. That strength was not in you before. It had to be developed. And development requires resistance. Muscles grow when they are challenged. Character grows when it is tested. Wisdom grows when it is wounded and healed properly. Think about how your standards changed after the mistake. What you once laughed at, you now reject. What you once excused, you now confront. What you once chased, you now avoid. That is evidence of education. You graduated from ignorance to awareness. You moved from reaction to reflection, from impulse to intention. That shift did not come from comfort, it came from consequence. You touched the stove and learned that fire burns. Now you respect heat. That does not make you weak, it makes you trained. The classroom also taught you humility. Before, you judged easily. After, you understood deeply. You stopped seeing people as categories and started seeing them as stories. You realized how easy it is to fall and how hard it is to rise. You realized that grace is not theory, it is survival. That is why you now extend what you once demanded. You learned that nobody changes through shame. They change through truth wrapped in love. That is knowledge you cannot get from sermons alone. It comes from experience that scars but also instructs. There is also a reason your mistake did not kill you. It could have destroyed your future completely, but it did not. That means it was not designed as an ending, it was designed as a turning point. A cage traps you. A classroom releases you. A cage takes away choice. A classroom teaches better choices. You were not sentenced to that life. You were trained in it. Trained to recognize danger. Trained to identify deception. Trained to hear your conscience louder than your cravings. Trained to see that what looks sweet at first can rot later. Now you carry a kind of wisdom that cannot be faked. When you speak about discipline, it is not theory. When you speak about temptation, it is not imagination. When you speak about recovery, it is not borrowed language, it is lived truth. That makes your voice powerful, that makes your presence credible, that makes your story usable. The classroom produced a teacher. The wound produced a witness. The fall produced a guide. You can now warn others without arrogance because you know the cost. You can now correct others without cruelty because you remember the pain. And do not confuse learning with approval. God did not approve of the sin, but he used the season. Fire does not approve of the metal, but it shapes it. Pressure does not love the stone, but it sharpens it. The mistake did not have permission, but it had a purpose. The lesson does not mean the behavior was good. It means the growth was real. There is a difference. A classroom is not comfortable, but it is constructive. A cage is hopeless, but a classroom is hopeful. One says you are stuck. The other says you are changing. You came out with vision. You came out with boundaries. You came out with hunger for truth. You came out with respect for timing. You came out knowing that peace is worth protecting. You came out knowing that character costs something. You came out knowing that obedience is not boring, it is protective. These are not small things, these are weapons against repetition. Because the real danger is not falling once, it is never learning why you fell. You are no longer impressed by the same things. That is education. You no longer crave what once controlled you. That is freedom. You no longer excuse what once trapped you. That is maturity. The classroom did not just teach you about sin, it taught you about strength. It taught you that you are capable of change. It taught you that discipline is not punishment, it is love in structure. It taught you that correction is not rejection, it is redirection. Now when temptation speaks, you hear memory. You remember the emptiness. You remember the regret. You remember the damage. And instead of calling it fun, you call it familiar danger. That is growth, that is wisdom, that is evidence that you graduated. The classroom served its role and released you into responsibility. You are no longer there to be trained, you are here to live trained. So do not carry shame like a sentence, carry it like a diploma, not celebrating the failure but honoring the lesson. Not proud of the mistake, but grateful for the transformation. You did not stay there. You did not build a home there. You learned and left. That is the difference between bondage and breakthrough. And now, when you walk forward, you do not walk naive. You walk aware. You do not walk careless. You walk cautious. You do not walk fearful. You walk informed. Pain was never meant to be wasted. It was meant to wake something up inside you. Before the wound, you had potential, but after the wound, you had direction. Pain has a way of focusing the soul. It strips away distractions and exposes what really matters. When everything was easy, you could afford to drift. When everything hurt, you had to decide. You had to choose whether you would become bitter or become better. And that choice is where purpose was born. Pain did not create your calling, but it activated it. It pushed you toward meaning when comfort kept you asleep. Pain taught you what you would have ignored. It taught you the value of peace by taking it away for a season. It taught you the value of loyalty by letting you experience betrayal. It taught you the value of boundaries by showing you what happens when there are none. These were not gentle lessons, but they were honest ones. Pain does not flatter. It tells the truth loudly. It shows you where you are weak and where you need strength. It reveals the places in your soul that still need healing and the places where courage is waiting to rise. There are people who found their voice because they were silenced. There are leaders who were born because they were once lost. There are healers who exist because they were once broken. Pain does something strange and sacred. It takes what tried to destroy you and turns it into what now defines you. What once made you feel small now makes you stand tall. What once made you hide now makes you speak. What once made you question your worth now fuels your desire to protect the worth of others. This is not coincidence. This is activation. When you were wounded, you learned empathy. Before the pain, you could talk about suffering. After the pain, you could feel it. You stopped seeing people as problems and started seeing them as people in process. You stopped offering easy answers and started offering presence. That shift is purpose. Purpose is not always a platform. Sometimes it is the ability to sit with someone in their darkest hour and not run away. Pain trained you to stay. It trained you to listen. It trained you to recognize the sound of despair and the shape of hope. You did not just survive pain, you studied it. You learned its language. You learned how it enters quietly and how it screams when ignored. You learned how it can harden a heart or soften it. And in that learning, something inside you began to form. You became someone who knows the way out because you have walked the way in. That is not an accident, that is preparation. Your tears watered the soil of your assignment. Your nights of questioning sharpened your sense of truth. Your moments of collapse built your capacity for compassion. Pain also broke illusions. It broke the illusion that life is always fair. It broke the illusion that people will always stay. It broke the illusion that strength means never falling. In the breaking, reality entered, and reality is where purpose lives. Purpose does not grow in fantasy. It grows in understanding. It grows when you know what it cost to be human and still choose to love. It grows when you know what it feels like to lose and still choose to hope. You once thought your pain disqualified you. Now you see it distinguished you. It separated you from shallow living. It gave your words weight. It gave your faith depth. It gave your joy meaning. Without pain, happiness is fragile. With pain, joy becomes powerful. You learned the difference between laughter and healing. You learned the difference between distraction and peace. You learned the difference between attention and love. These are not small lessons. They shape how you live and how you serve. Pain forced you to look inward. It forced you to confront habits you excused and fears you hid. It forced you to admit that you needed help. That admission is not weakness. It is the door to purpose. Purpose begins where pride ends. When you stopped pretending you were fine, you started becoming real. And real is where transformation happens. Masks cannot heal. Honesty can. There were moments when pain made you question everything, your faith, your worth, your future. But in those questions, something stronger formed. You did not just inherit beliefs anymore, you examined them. You did not just repeat words anymore, you searched for meaning. Pain turned your spirituality from routine into relationship. It turned your hope from theory into survival. That is activation. What was once tradition became conviction. What was once borrowed became personal. Your pain also taught you timing. It taught you that healing cannot be rushed and growth cannot be forced. It taught you patience with yourself and patience with others. Before pain, you expected quick change. A After pain, you understood process. You learned that scars close slowly and trust returns carefully. That understanding is purpose. It allows you to walk with people instead of pushing them. It allows you to build instead of demand. Pain restructured your priorities. Things that once seemed important now seem small. Things that once seemed small now feel sacred. You guard your peace now. You value your time now. You choose your company now. That is not accident. That is education through suffering. Pain taught you that life is too fragile to waste on what does not matter. It taught you that love is too rare to be careless with. It taught you that truth is too valuable to trade for comfort. Your purpose is not in pretending the pain never happened. It is in using what it taught you. It is in letting your story become shelter for someone else. It is in letting your survival become instruction. You are not meant to relive the pain, but you are meant to remember the lesson. Memory keeps you grounded. Memory keeps you humble. Memory keeps you grateful. Pain also revealed strength you did not know you had. You thought you would break, but you bent. You thought you would quit, but you stayed. You thought you would lose your mind, but you learned to breathe again. That endurance is not random. It is capacity. It is evidence that you are built for more than comfort. You are built for impact. Comfort keeps you quiet. Pain gives you a voice. What hurt you also positioned you. It positioned you among those who know what it is to struggle. It positioned you as someone who can speak without pretending. It positioned you as someone who can say, "I have been there," and mean it. That sentence alone can save lives. That sentence can restore hope. That sentence can break isolation. That sentence is purpose in action. You no longer see pain as just an enemy. You see it as a messenger, not because it feels good, but because it carries information. It tells you when something is wrong. It tells you when something needs attention. It tells you when something needs to change. Ignored pain becomes poison. Understood pain becomes power. The pain did not make you special. The response did. Many are hurt, few are healed, many suffer, few grow. You chose to search for meaning instead of hiding in misery. That search shaped you, it refined you, it aimed you. Purpose is not found in avoiding pain, it is found in allowing pain to point you toward truth. Now your life has a weight it did not have before. Your smile has history. Your words have evidence. Your faith has scars. That is not weakness, that is authority. You do not speak from theory, you speak from survival, and survival, when surrendered, becomes service. Pain activated your purpose by breaking your comfort and awakening your compassion. It did not come to end you, it came to send you. It sent you toward truth. It sent you toward healing. It sent you toward people who need what you now carry. Mercy did not just forgive you, it reintroduced you to yourself. Before mercy, your identity was tangled in what you did. You woke up thinking about your mistakes and went to sleep remembering your failures. Your name became your regret. Your reflection looked like your worst moment. You were no longer a person in process, you were a verdict in your own mind. But mercy stepped in and interrupted that story. It's aid. You are not finished, and you are not frozen in time. It said your past may explain you, but it does not own you. It said your history may shape you, but it does not have the right to label you forever. Mercy does something that punishment never can. Punishment tells you what you did wrong. Mercy tells you who you still are. It does not erase responsibility, but it removes the chains from it. It says you can learn without being destroyed. You can be corrected without being condemned. You can be honest without being abandoned. That changes the way you see yourself. Instead of seeing a criminal, you begin to see a student. Instead of seeing a failure, you begin to see a work in progress. Instead of seeing a lost cause, you begin to see a life being rebuilt. Before mercy, shame was loud. Shame told you to hide. It told you to lower your expectations. It told you to accept smallness, because greatness would only expose your past. Shame made you believe that distance from God was safer than closeness. But mercy speaks in a different tone. It does not shout. It invites. It does not accuse. It restores. It does not say you are dirty. It says you are washed. It does not say you are broken beyond repair. It says you are being made new. That voice slowly replaces the one that tried to bury you in regret. When mercy touched you, it did not just change your record, it changed your posture. You stopped walking with your head down and started lifting your eyes again. You stopped expecting rejection and started expecting growth. You stopped apologizing for existing and started learning how to live with intention. Mercy does not make you careless, it makes you careful in a healthy way. It teaches you the cost of sin without chaining you to it. It shows you the seriousness of your actions without stripping you of hope. Your identity before mercy was fragile. It depended on approval, performance, and comparison. When you did well, you felt worthy. When you failed, you felt useless. Mercy gave you a foundation that does not shake with every mistake. It taught you that your value does not rise and fall with your behavior. It taught you that worth is something you receive, not something you earn. That does not make you lazy, it makes you secure. Secure people grow, insecure people hide. Mercy also taught you how to see others differently. When you were harsh with yourself, you were harsh with the world. When you expected punishment, you gave judgment. But after mercy found you, you learned how to recognize yourself in others. You saw that people are not their worst days. You saw that struggle is not the same as character. You saw that correction without compassion creates rebellion, but correction with love creates change. That perspective is not natural, it is learned through being forgiven. There was a moment when you realized that God did not just tolerate you, He wanted you. That realization shifts something deep inside. Tolerance feels like obligation. Mercy feels like desire. It says you are not just allowed in the room, you are welcomed. It says you are not here because you proved something, you are here because you were loved first. That kind of acceptance does not make you careless. It makes you loyal. It makes you want to live in a way that honors the grace you were given. Before mercy, your identity was survival. You were just trying to make it through without collapsing. After mercy, your identity became purpose. You were no longer just avoiding hell, you were moving toward life. You were no longer defined by what you escaped, but by what you were becoming. That shift is quiet but powerful. It is the difference between running from something and running toward something. Mercy also healed the way you remember your past. It did not delete it, but it reframed it. What used to feel like proof that you were unworthy became evidence that you were rescued. What used to feel like a stain became a testimony. What used to make you flinch became something you could look at and say, that is where I was, not who I am. Memory stopped being a weapon and became a mirror that showed you how far you have come. Your prayers changed because of mercy. Before you prayed like a beggar afraid of rejection. Now you pray like a child who knows they belong. You no longer have to convince God to listen. You trust that He already is. You no longer perform spirituality to cover guilt. You pursue truth because you are free. That does not make you perfect, it makes you honest. Mercy also reshaped your courage. Before, you were afraid to fail because failure felt final. After mercy, failure became feedback, not a funeral. You learned that falling does not erase your calling. You learned that stumbling does not cancel your future. You learned that growth is messy and still meaningful. That gave you the courage to try again, to love again, to hope again, to believe that your life is not a mistake. There is a difference between being spared and being restored. Mercy does not just save you from punishment, it restores you to positio N. It puts you back in relationship. It puts you back in dignity. It puts you back in purpose. You are not living on leftovers. You are living on assignment. You are not surviving on scraps. You are walking in design. Mercy also silenced the voice that said you would always be that person, the one who messed up, the one who ruined everything, the one who cannot be trusted. That voice does not disappear overnight, but it loses authority. Each day you walk forward, mercy proves it wrong. Each day you choose differently, mercy rewrites your reputation, not just in heaven, but inside you. Your identity is no longer criminal, it is chosen. No longer rejected, it is restored. No longer condemned, it is called. That does not mean you forget where you came from. It means you no longer live there. You remember the pit, but you live on the path. You acknowledge the fall, but you walk in the rising. Mercy also taught you patience with yourself. You learn that growth is not instant. You learn that healing is layered. You learn that relapse is not the end, but a signal that something still needs attention. Instead of hating yourself for weakness, you learn to strengthen it. Instead of running from truth, you learn to lean into it. That is maturity born from grace. There was a time when you thought God kept you because he had no better option. Now you know he kept you because you mattered. That realization is dangerous in the best way. It destroys self-hatred. It weakens fear. It builds responsibility. When you know you are loved, you stop trying to earn it and start trying to live worthy of it. Mercy did not erase your personality. It refined it. It did not silence your voice. It purified it. Did not take away your fire. It aimed it. You are still you, but now you are you without chains. You are still passionate, but now you are disciplined. You are still emotional, but now you are anchored. You are still bold, but now you are wise. Trials did not come to stop you, they came to shape you. What felt like resistance was actually rehearsal. Every battle you faced in private was practice for a purpose you had not yet seen. You thought you were just trying to survive, but you were being trained. Trained in patience when answers did not come quickly. Trained in endurance when quitting felt easier. Trained in faith when evidence disappeared. The assignment ahead of you required muscles you did not yet have, and trials were the gym where those muscles were built. You were introduced to pressure long before you were introduced to purpose. Pressure taught you how to stand when everything around you wanted to collapse. It taught you how to breathe when panic tried to control you. It taught you how to hold on when letting go seemed safer. Those lessons were not random. You were learning how to carry weight, and every assignment worth carrying has weight to it. Responsibility without preparation would have crushed you. Influence without endurance would have broken you, so the trials came first not to destroy you, but to develop you. There were seasons when you felt invisible, working hard, praying quietly, struggling privately. That invisibility was not neglect, it was training. In hidden places, pride is stripped away. In quiet places, motives are revealed. In lonely places, character is formed. You learned how to be faithful without applause. You learned how to stay honest without witnesses. You learned how to obey without reward. Those are the qualities needed when the assignment becomes public. Because what looks good in the light must be strong in the dark. Every trial forced you to confront something inside you. Fear, anger, impatience, control, doubt. These were not enemies sent to defeat you. They were teachers sent to expose you. You could not lead others past fear until you faced your own. You could not speak peace until you learned to survive chaos. You could not offer hope until you wrestled with despair. Your assignment required depth, not just talent. Trials gave you depth. They dug into you and pulled out what surface living never would. You learned how to pray when words felt empty. You learned how to trust when outcomes were uncertain. You learned how to wait when everything in you wanted to rush. Waiting was not wasted time. It was discipline. It was strengthening your inner world so your outer world would not rule you. Impulsive people cannot carry divine assignments. Reactive people cannot steward long-term purpose. Trials slowed you down so wisdom could catch up with your desire. There were moments when you thought you were being delayed, but you were actually being aligned. If the door had opened earlier, you would have walked in with ego instead of humility. If the blessing had come sooner, you would have depended on it instead of on God. If the victory had arrived without struggle, you would have believed you earned it. The trial taught you dependence. And dependence is not weakness, it is accuracy. It keeps you connected to the source of your strength. You were also trained in discernment. Trials showed you who stayed and who left. They revealed who listened and who used you. They exposed what voices lifted you and what voices drained you. This was not heartbreak for nothing. It was education in trust. Your assignment will involve people, and people require wisdom. You now know the difference between presence and loyalty. You know the difference between attention and commitment. That knowledge protects what God is building through you. Trials also trained your emotions. Before, you were ruled by them. After, you learned to read them without obeying them. You discovered that anger can signal injustice without becoming cruelty. You discovered that sadness can invite healing without becoming despair. You discovered that fear can warn without becoming a prison. Emotional discipline is not suppression, it is direction. And direction is required when you carry something greater than yourself. You learned endurance not as an idea, but as a habit. You woke up when you did not want to. You kept going when you were tired. You believed when you felt empty. That consistency was not glamorous, but it was powerful. It trained you to finish. And assignments from God require finishers, not starters. Many can begin with excitement. Few can continue with faith. Trials taught you how to continue. Your failures during trials were not proof that you were unfit. They were part of the training. Falling taught you how to rise. Mistakes taught you how to adjust. Weak moments taught you how to seek help. The assignment is not carried by perfection, it is carried by resilience. And resilience is built when things go wrong, and you do not give up. You were trained to hear God in chaos. When life was calm, His voice was easy to miss. When life was loud, His voice became necessary. You learn to listen not just for comfort, but for direction. That skill will matter when others are confused and need guidance. You will not just speak words, you will speak from relationship. There were trials that taught you leadership without a title. You carried responsibility without recognition. You served without spotlight. You solved problems without credit. That is training for influence that does not corrupt. Power without humility destroys. Authority without compassion controls. Trials taught you humility. They taught you compassion. They taught you how to lead from understanding instead of ego. You were also trained in sacrifice. You gave up things you wanted because you knew they would cost you more later. You walked away from paths that were easy because they were not right. That self-denial was not loss, it was investment. The assignment will demand choices that others do not understand. Trials prepared you to choose purpose over pleasure and truth over comfort. There were nights when you questioned if it was worth it. Those nights were not weakness. They were refining fire. They forced you to answer why you were still standing. And each time your reason became clearer. You were not surviving for nothing. You were being shaped for something. Trials also trained your language. You stopped speaking from fantasy and started speaking from fact. You stopped promising what you could not carry. You stopped exaggerating what you had not lived. Your words became measured. Your tone became thoughtful. Your advice became honest. That is the voice of Meone, who has walked through storms and knows the map. You learned how to fight without becoming violent, how to stand without becoming hard, how to be bold without becoming bitter. That balance is rare, and it only comes from trials that did not break you but taught you restraint. Your assignment will require strength that does not crush and courage that does not wound. Every trial added weight to your spirit and clarity to your vision. You now know what you are willing to lose and what you are willing to die for. You now know what matters and what does not. That clarity is not emotional, it is forged. You are not stepping into your assignment as a beginner. You are stepping in as someone trained in storms, seasoned in waiting, tested in fire. You do not just carry words, you carry evidence. You do not just carry hope, you carry history. The trial did not mean God doubted you. It meant he trusted you with training. He trusted that you would not waste the struggle. He trusted that you would grow instead of quit. He trusted that you would listen instead of harden. Now, when pressure comes again, it does not surprise you. When opposition appears, it does not stop you. When delay happens, it does not confuse you. You recognize the environment. You have been here before, and you came out stronger. Your assignment is not fragile, and neither are you, because what was built in you during trials cannot be taken by comfort. You were forged in seasons where faith had to be chosen and obedience had to be intentional. You did not train for applause. You trained for impact. You did not train for ease. You trained for endurance. And now, when you stand in what you were prepared, D4, you will not collapse under the weight of it. You will carry it with humility, wisdom, and strength. Your story is not just memory, it is medicine. What you lived through is not locked in the past. It breathes every time you open your mouth with honesty. There are people walking right now through what you already survived, and they do not need theory, they need proof. They need to see a living example that the pit is not permanent and the night is not endless. When you speak from experience, your words carry a weight that cannot be borrowed. They do not sound like advice, they sound like direction. They do not sound like opinion, they sound like escape routes. You may think your journey is too messy to matter, but mess is exactly what makes it useful. Perfect stories inspire admiration. Real stories create movement. When someone hears that you were once afraid, confused, addicted, broken, or lost, and now you stand healed, stable, and hopeful, something inside them shifts. They stop seeing their struggle as unique and start seeing it as survivable. Isolation breaks when recognition appears, and recognition is the doorway to change. There is power in saying, "I was there too." Those 4 words can dissolve shame faster than sermons. They tell someone they are not defective, they are human. They tell someone they are not alone, they are understood. They tell someone they are not finished, they are in process. Your story becomes a bridge between despair and possibility. It connects where they are to where you have been and where you are now. You do not have to preach to save someone. Sometimes your consistency saves them. Sometimes your patience saves them. Sometimes your refusal to give up saves them. They watch how you handle pressure. They watch how you speak about your past. They watch how you treat people who are still struggling. And without knowing it, they begin to copy your courage. Your recovery teaches them how to recover. Your discipline teaches them how to change. Your faith teaches them how to believe again. When you hide your story, you hide the map. When you share it, you give directions. Not everyone will need it, but someone will. Somewhere, someone is sitting in silence, thinking their situation has no exit. Your testimony becomes the evidence that exits exist. You show them that healing is not imagination. It is possible. Your story does not glorify the pain, it glorifies the survival. It does not praise the sin, it praises the rescue. It does not highlight weakness, it highlights transformation. That is why it is powerful. It shows contrast, darkness and light, then and now, lost and found, broken and restored. People need contrast to believe in change. There are wounds that only healed people can touch. Advice without experience can sound like judgment, but guidance wrapped in empathy sounds like safety. You know where it hurts because it hurt you there. You know where people lie to themselves because you once did. You know where fear hides because you lived with it. That knowledge is not random. It is assignment. Your story teaches others what not to do without shaming them. It shows consequences without condemning them. It warns without arrogance. It invites without pressure. That balance is rare, and it is born from having walked the road yourself. You are not called to broadcast everything. You are called to be obedient with what is needed. There will be moments when someone opens up to you and you feel that quiet pull to say, "I understand." That is not coincidence, that is timing. God does not waste experiences. He releases them when they are required. Sometimes your story will save someone from making the same mistake. Sometimes it will save someone who already did. Sometimes it will give language to pain they could not describe. Sometimes it will give courage to a heart that was about to quit. You will not always see the result, but seeds grow in silence. There are people who will never read a Bible but will read your life. There are people who will never enter a church but will enter a conversation with you. There are people who will never listen to sermons but will listen to your journey. You become the message because you survived it. Your scars speak without shouting. They say, "This hurt me, but it did not end me." They say, "This almost killed me, but it taught me." They say, "This broke me, but it built me." Scars are not signs of defeat. They are proof of healing. You may think your past disqualifies you, but it actually qualifies you. It qualifies you to recognize danger. It qualifies you to understand struggle. It qualifies you to speak with compassion instead of criticism. The very thing you thought ruined you now equips you. There will be moments when sharing your story feels risky. Vulnerability always does. But vulnerability is not weakness when it is guided by wisdom. It is connection. It allows others to drop their masks because you dropped yours. It creates space for truth to breathe. Your story also reminds you of who you are not anymore. Every time you speak about where you came from, you remember why you left. It keeps you humble. It keeps you grateful. It keeps you alert. It keeps you moving forward. Someone is praying right now for an answer that looks like you, not because you are perfect, but because you are real. They are asking God to show them that change is possible, and you are the proof walking around in front of them. Your story does not need to be dramatic to be powerful. It needs to be honest. Honest about fear, honest about failure, honest about faith, honest about growth. People recognize truth when they hear it. You will not save everyone, that is not your job. But you will save someone, and that someone may save someone else. That is how light multiplies. One life touches another, and another, and another. Your journey gives permission for others to begin theirs. It tells them that starting over is not shameful. It is brave. It tells them that repentance is not humiliation. It is freedom. It tells them that asking for help is not weakness. It is wisdom. The enemy wanted your story to end in silence. God wants it to echo in healing. What tried to bury you is now what builds others. That is divine reversal. You do not speak to impress. You speak to liberate. You do not share to be admired. You share to be understood. And in that understanding, chains loosen. Your voice reaches places your hands never will. Your words travel into minds you will never see again. Your truth moves into hearts you may never hear from. That does not mean it failed. It means it worked quietly. There will be days when you feel ordinary. But someone is watching your ordinary life and seeing extraordinary hope. Chosen one, your past did not cancel your future. It constructed it. What once tried to break you became the very thing that built you. Your sins taught you, your pain activated you, mercy restored you, trials trained you, and your story now saves others. You are not here by chance. You are here by design. Walk forward without shame, speak without fear, and live with purpose. God did not waste your struggle. He transformed it into assignment. Now go, not as who you were, but as who you were called to be.